Well, good afternoon, everybody, those who have just joined us, and welcome to this Ethical Reading event, which is part of the Reading Climate Festival. I'm Rob Hill, one of the volunteers with Ethical Reading. The event is being recorded, so if you don't wish to show your face, you may wish to turn off your camera, and obviously if you can keep on mute until the end when we have our Q&A session. If you have any points or questions, if you could put those in the chat and we'll collate all those at the end. Now, absolutely delighted to have such a panel as we have today. We have Emma Street from the Henley Business School. We have James Turner and Lucy Prismal from the Reading Borough Council, and also we have Richard Kirk from Better Point. And what we hope is that the discussion about active travel today will have three different perspectives, as it is a very important topic, as we know. But I've spoken already far too long, so I think it would be best now if I now hand over to Emma Street, and she will introduce herself and what she plans to say. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Rob, please shout if the audio is no good. I'm Associate Professor at Henley Business School. My background is in urban policy and governance. So as Rob mentioned, I've got a particular take on the topic today on active travel. And I'm going to approach that predominantly from a focus on regeneration, in particular town centre regeneration. So that's my kind of take today. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the role of active travel in urban regeneration. So thanks very much for having me to speak at the event today. In many ways, today is an age of crisis. And in the context of town centres, as I mentioned, my spatial focus for today's talk, these crises, I should say, are multiple. Next slide, please. This quote that you can hopefully see on screen now expresses some of these crises. We are by now well used to narratives such as the death of the high street. You see those plastered all over the media. And in choosing this quote, I really was quite spoilt for choice. I'm just going to shut my emails. Term starts next week, so it's a constant ping. So the COVID-19 pandemic has only served to amplify this narrative of crisis. It's accelerated some of the trends underlying these, including the shift to online retailing, the loss of major chain stores, and changing commuter habits. Next slide, please. So in parallel, we've seen growing institutional recognition of the scale and urgency of climate change, which has led to, amongst other things, local authorities such as Reading Borough Council declaring a climate emergency in February 2019, and then the laying out of targets such as, in Reading's case, a carbon neutral borough by 2030. So in my remaining time, I want to explore the role that active travel, that's quite a fancy term, essentially it refers to non-motorised modes of transportation, so moving people and goods. Often the focus in policy is on walking and cycling, the role that can play in addressing some of the challenges associated with current and, really importantly, the future crises that we now know will necessitate profound changes to the ways in which we live. And this includes, of course, the way that we make use of, the way we access, relate to and experience our urban centres. So my argument is basically that this can't just be about recovery. It's about looking for answers to much harder questions that might be summed up as, well, recovery to what? And then perhaps even harder still, how? And of course, I'm not going to be able to answer those questions in the next 10 minutes, but I do want to explore if something as seemingly simple, scare quotes there, as walking and cycling can play a role in bridging the gap between global crises, strategic carbon reduction targets, and more localised behaviours such as high street shopping. Next slide, please. Now, I am not naive, and indeed academics tend towards the most cynical end of the societal spectrum, but I've attempted to cast these tendencies off and adopt today the language of opportunity. Now, the first of these I want to touch on relates to the confluence of two policy agendas, the active travel and what we might call the town centre or high street agenda. There's also a convergence of things within these agendas, namely around how active travel can help support what we might call place values. Things like vibrancy, a more diverse town centre offer, essentially the range of services within them and the user experience that these can help to create, as well as the quality of spaces and streets, including the public realm, and many other things besides. Now, the second opportunity is key, and it relates to the prevailing commercial headwinds, which, especially in the retail sector here in the UK, are very uncertain at the moment, but which, again, being optimistic, may provide what we might refer to as the short-term slack, for example, through empty retail units, for uses that may be more consistent with an understanding of place value beyond the wholly economic. This might, in turn, if we get it right, support a more diverse user experience, essentially enabling people to do more than just one thing, cutting out, therefore, the need to go elsewhere for these services, perhaps further afield by car. Ultimately, my argument is that this commercial uncertainty might allow for a more open-ended exploration of the recovery to what question that I posed. Next slide, please. So let's take a quick look at the policy agendas first. Both the active travel and town centre agendas have received significant political attention right from the top of government, as well as funding in recent years. Now, I am far from an apologist for central government. Like I said, I'm not naive. Like most academics, I tend to be quite cynical. And I'm sure there's some salami slicing going on here when it relates to the funding. Others would argue that the levels are dwarfed by the scale of challenges that our town centres face. And others argue that the level of ambition, particularly around travel behaviour change that documents such as gear change referred to here, are insufficient. But with that said, the recognition that switching to active travel modes, especially for the kind of journey lengths that typify for many of us a trip to the shops, for instance, or a coffee to meet friends, is there, and that is still something, as is the indication of the kinds of carbon reductions that this can help deliver, as well as the economic benefits that may accrue from the greater uptake of active travel modes. Of course, there are also embedded within these agendas really crucial things around the health benefits, including cost savings to the NHS, as well as the number of premature deaths that can be saved through improved air quality. So there's a lot potentially to gain here. Next slide, please. Now, we can see similar statements about the mutually reinforcing benefits of active travel, well-designed local spaces within localised net zero carbon targets themselves. So, for instance, you can see here on the slide the Reading Climate Action Network statement about achieving net zero carbon Reading by 2030. That would require substantial reductions in the need to travel and a significant switch for cars to more sustainable modes of travel, as well as other things. Now, from my perspective, what we see here is a triple line policy convergence of active travel, town centre regeneration and zero carbon. In essence, that's an agenda that's there for the taking. So how might this be achieved? Well, it's interesting that the first of the targets referred to in Cannes list refers to the need to carefully plan the location of services, as well as integrating opportunities for sustainable living, working and shopping in new developments. But, of course, for better or worse, much of our urban environment is already planned and developed, and that may, in terms of sustainability goals and targets, not be in the right way. What we therefore might more usefully be doing, as well as the same time as strategically planning those kinds of new places, is think about regeneration rather than necessarily comprehensive redevelopment or waiting for perfectly executed new development to do all of the legwork. I'm not saying that that's what this is saying, but we've got to be doing incremental things, I guess, is my message in the meantime. Now, I know that Lucy and James will be talking much more about how active travel goals are being embedded in local plan making, and that's absolutely essential for the delivery, but also the integration of active travel goals, particularly when it comes to infrastructure schemes, and these are absolutely essential. But essentially, are there opportunities now within town centres to do things better more incrementally? Some examples then. This might be about building on the principles of pedestrianisation. So much of Reading Town Centre has already adopted pedestrianisation very successfully in many ways. Is there a way to just do a little bit more? For example, thinking about street furniture, signage, car parking provisions, all part and parcel of making active travel modes like cycling feel more thoughtfully and purposefully integrated into the public realm. Now, I'm not for a minute suggesting that no cycling signs, removing those, or being able to park your bike more easily is the only reason that someone chooses to cycle. And I know that much more will be said about behaviour change agendas as part of this event. Nor am I saying that these kind of acts of what we might call micro regeneration are going to achieve the kinds of increases in walking and cycling we need to deliver the tons and tons and tons of carbon that we need to save in order to meet those zero carbon goals. Equally, they can only be part of the answer to the challenges facing town centre now. But being concerned about getting your bike stolen, especially when it combines with other disincentives to choose to ride over other transport modes like driving, for example, might actually be quite important, particularly for you as an individual, and perhaps that has knock-on behaviour change effects. Incidentally, research suggests that cycle parking delivers 5 times the retail spend per square metre than the same area of car parking. So there are economic gains to be had here. Okay, to turn away from the policy side then to the commercial opportunity that I mentioned. Commercial leases up and down the country are currently being revisited. And that's especially so in light of insolvency by multiple retailers. So the chain stores, for example, that we all know have ceased to exist. Rebasing is taking place in the form of 50% of the rent that was paid pre-pandemic in some places, according to the regional agent Hicks Baker. So what that means is, as landlords seek to avoid vacant units at all costs, and I've heard this in research interviews, this is absolutely the thing to avoid, even if that means that the money that you can accrue from rental incomes is reduced quite drastically in the short term. There may be opportunities to make productive use of uncertainty within the system. For example, to deliver town centre uses that help progress the active travel as well as zero carbon agendas. And the cycle parking hub that Ethical Reading and Reading Borough Council are involved in is a prime example of this. It's got the potential to tick a number of place value boxes, essentially. Next slide, please. So this is about what we might call the short-term slack. And there's a quote here that taps into that kind of changing, quite fluid commercial market in the Reading context. Next slide, please. So this image isn't about active travel per se. I partly used it because it's such a nice picture. It's also a nice example of how temporary uses can help enliven town centre spaces. This is of a travelling art and storytelling installation that visited the Lexicon shopping centre in nearby Bracknell this summer. Now, shopping centres have, of course, been especially hard hit by the loss of major retail chains. Next slide, please. So, to conclude, society, and by extension our urban spaces, how we make use of them, face a confluence of challenges. Some of those have been accelerated dramatically by recent crises, and all of them, and this is a very challenging reality, require quite urgent action. But herein also lie opportunities. Policy agendas, whether by design or perhaps by accident, who knows, are aligning in quite helpful ways, particularly for active travel. And there's also some funding around here too, which is a really nice thing, particularly to support those activities that kind of bring those agendas together. So at the kind of confluence of active travel, local regeneration and place shaping. But in order to avoid these being wholly piecemeal, we need a curation of uses, including some of the temporary examples that I've given, as part of long-term strategies that we need to move towards what we might call more place-sensitive forms of regeneration, in which opportunities to support active travel and zero carbon goals are recognised and then crucially acted upon. Now, I know much more will be said about the role of businesses. I just want to say a couple of words before I wrap up. This could be, for example, through in-house stuff, encouraging employees to cycle, looking at your cargo or delivery fleets and thinking about how they can be decarbonised through the use of e-trikes, for example. Now, that might be something you can do yourself. Of course, it depends on your business model, but there may be things that you can do to put pressure on clients and suppliers to do these kinds of things too. So there are kind of scalar benefits that can be accrued here. All can have powerful positive effects on place and on carbon reduction. And businesses and third sectors may also feel able to get more directly involved in place shaping and regeneration activities, like in the Cycle Hub example I've referred to. In the medium term, we'll need leadership from the investor and landlord communities too. So I mentioned this slack around the kind of pausing, at least, of traditional modes of retail-led regeneration. But as we see town centre investments being revalued, we may well see fire sales. Those assets may become much less attractive, and that will create further instability. So the strength of corporate environmental social government, ESG agendas, which shows so much promise to drive and deliver change at the scale and rate that we need, particularly when it comes to zero carbon, may well be put to the test. Essentially, and this is my final line, I really hope I've kept broadly to time, I think we can all agree that we should be doing things differently. And right now, in this moment, for reasons of policy, ethics, and now even possibly commerciality, it makes sense to actually be doing them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma. That's absolutely terrific. I think gives a lot to think about. Right. We'll move rapidly on, as I say. We're going to have James Turney and Lucy Prismal from Reading Borough Council, who will speak about the policies that Reading Council are enacting at the moment and plan to have up and running in the future. So I'll hand over to James.
Thanks very much. Can I just check everyone can hear me? Do an audio check. Great stuff. Thank you. Okay. Thanks very much, everyone. Like I said, I'm James Turner, and my colleague Lucy Prismal is with me today. We are both transport planners in the strategic transport team at Reading Borough Council, working on a range of policies and strategies, as well as our sort of delivery of our transport, various sort of transport across the board. Just to give a quick outlay, I'm going to talk very briefly about local policy, what our local policies are, and a bit about the detail and how they were created, before Lucy's going to talk more interestingly about what we have delivered and what we have in our sort of pipeline, our current and future plans. So in terms of our policy, we've got the Reading Transport Strategy 2036. Now that is currently out in draft form. We did consult on it last year. I'll talk about that in the next few slides. But hopefully most of you will be aware of that. We did extensive consultation, and I think I spoke to a number of people about across Reading on that. So I'll move on to that. We've got the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, the RLC Whip, that most of you will probably be aware of. We've got an air quality action plan, climate change strategy. We've got our net zero carbon pledge to 2030 and our corporate plan, and I'll touch on those briefly as well. But in terms of our transport strategy, I've put up the vision there that you can read. I won't read it out, but it's our fourth local transport plan. We think it's the most radical and important yet, because the challenges that we are now facing in terms of transport and sustainability, and to promote active travel. The strategy aims to tackle poor air quality, congestion, and help achieve our net zero carbon target by 2030, amongst other sort of transport targets that we have in there. So, like I said, we did an extensive visioning exercise back in 2019. I think we had over 3,000 responses to our questionnaire online. We also did a number of drop-in sessions around the town, and I think I probably bumped into some of you at those. We had a very busy one up in Caversham and at the town hall, and they were very lively and enjoyable events where we got to talk to people in Reading about our transport strategy and the objectives in those, which you can see there, which we discussed, and just wanted to highlight the two, creating clean and green Reading and supporting healthy lifestyles as two of the major ones, which relate to active travel. So these were sort of very important to a lot of the people that responded to our consultation and wanted a cleaner Reading. They wanted better air quality. They wanted more sustainable travel, be able to walk and cycle around the town a lot easier. And I think with the amount of congestion, that can often be a barrier. So that were the strong themes that came back from the visioning consultation, and the sort of the discussions we had with people face to face back in the time when we could do that, was that those themes were coming through very heavily. So those are integral to our transport strategy. and they work throughout the document. If you move on to the next slide. Oh, sorry. Just to wrap up before Lucy talks about what we have delivered and what's in our future, we also have a number of other strategies that we're working on: the bus service improvement plan, electric vehicle strategy, and also we're working on a town centre sort of urban strategy, which relates to what Emma was talking about previously. And I think what all of these will knit together to provide, so that there isn't one single solution or policy or strategy. I think they all play their part, but particularly active travel and sustainable travel will be a very key element to all of that. Lucy, do you want to?
Thanks, James. So I'm going to talk about what we've delivered so far. So one of the most notable things we've delivered is the Christchurch Bridge, and that's a pedestrian and cyclist bridge across the River Thames, providing a really good north-south link. And since that's gone in, we are working on improving that link even more and strengthening that north-south link through upcoming developments in the area. And just a stone's throw away, we've got Reading Station Cycle Hub on the Northern Interchange. And since that's gone in, we've recently installed 3 CCTV cameras to kind of improve the security of that area. We'd also quite like to create this area turn it into more of a cycle hub and make further improvements down the line. And so as part of the funding that we got to do that, we also installed 3 wayfinding signs around the station area. And again, that's something we would like to roll out throughout the town centre when funding comes available. Another major infrastructure project that we've delivered is the National Cycle Network, Route 422, and that's a cross-boundary cycle route running from Newbury to Windsor, and that goes through the entire borough, providing both a mixture of on carriageway facilities as well as off carriageway facilities, and that's now complete. And some more kind of like school related initiatives. So Mode Shift Stars is the National Sustainable Travel Programme, and that's like an award system. So we're rolling that out to schools. We've got quite a good engagement with schools at the moment, and we're looking at encouraging more schools to take that on, as that really kind of gets schools to think about their long-term commitment to sustainable travel, and consider how they can make changes to alter people's travel behaviour. And that's something that can also be rolled out to businesses as well. Bikeability is essentially the cycling proficiency. So that's something that the council's been running for quite a while now. And that's on offer to every child in Reading. We also offer adult courses and family courses, and again that's all aimed at encouraging people to change their travel behaviour and increase confidence in cycling, perhaps learning to cycle, even adults. So that's going really well at the moment. Living Streets WOW programme, so that's walk on Wednesdays or walk once a week, and that's a year-long programme. And again, we've engaged with quite a few schools on that, and it's been generally quite successful. But more recently, we've been working on the Active Travel Fund schemes, so Tranche 1 schemes. So this came about right at the start of the pandemic, where the Department of Transport wanted councils to install these temporary in nature schemes very quickly. And there's some images here of 3 of our schemes. One's on Whitley Street, the other one's Southampton Street and Silver Street. And so at the moment with that, we've delivered them, and we've been monitoring and evaluating and seeing how people are reacting. So we're now at the review process. So we've done the road safety audits, we've got our traffic survey data, and we're currently looking at, you know, what's the next steps for that. Do we go out to consultation? Do we make them permanent? Do we make changes? So that's really what's being worked on at the moment internally. So more will be said on that at a later date. And then we've got our School Streets programme. So we've now got 3 school street trials in the borough. So we've got Park Lane, which was our first one, and then Wilson and Thameside. We're really pleased that we've got 3 going already, and so far so good. We've had really good feedback on this, and even, you know, going down to the school street and seeing it happening, like, you hear all the comments from the children, parents, and even residents are in support. So yeah, so we feel like this School Streets programme offers a lot of benefits. Not only does it encourage people to cycle and walk more, but it's obvious it improves air quality as well, and general mental and physical well-being, which is obviously very important. And just to mention, we've got a 4th school street coming soon at Crescent Road, and that is due to commence from the 1st of November. So we're excited to see how that one goes. Again, that one is a trial as well. And then, so current and future plans. So obviously, main focus at the moment has been on the active travel fund schemes. So tranche 1, as I said, we're at the review process, and we'll work on the next steps. So tranche 2, we recently did a initial engagement exercise on 4 different schemes in Reading, and as a result of that engagement, the people of Reading chose Shinfield Road as the top priority, and so we're now working on delivering that, but we're at the detailed design stage. So once we've got that ready to go, we will go out to further consultation in the coming months and hope to commence construction around March next year. And we're pleased to say that we have submitted a further bid for tranche 3, and we have recommended putting forward Bath Road, which was ranked 2nd in our initial engagement. So again, we're waiting to see what the DFT say about that, but fingers crossed. And then we have the Travel Demand Management Fund. So that's where the School Streets programme is funded. So as I mentioned before, we've got the 4th one coming along, and we're open to more school streets. We're always engaging with our schools and trying to promote it further. Another thing we're working on at the moment is updating our cycling and walking maps. So providing an interactive tool for people to see with the current network and plan their route, basically. And then the Capability Fund. So we recently found out that we were successful with our proposal, and we have won just under £250,000. And our flagship scheme of that proposal was the town centre cycle hub. And our proposal for that was a secure hub with a maintenance facility and a loan facility. So as it's been mentioned a bit already, so we've been in conversations with Ethical Reading and a few other organisations on, you know, how is it going to happen, who's going to be involved, where is it going to be, and we're still in the initial stages. We need to do a bit of internal investigation, a bit more, so nothing confirmed yet, but we do want to be able to deliver something that is obviously you know, we want it to be a long-term investment in Reading and kind of create a community-based hub in a sense. But yeah, more to come on that eventually. And then as part of that fund, we also have allocated some spends to update the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, given that the latest guidance, local transport note 120 has come out. It needs a refresh, and we need to do that. So that will be good to get done. And And then we have also recently submitted a couple of expressions of interest. One was for the Mini Hollands Development Programme, and the second was the GP prescribing pilot. Again, we're waiting to hear from the department to see if we're successful with those, but it just goes to show, you know, the council are continuing to, you know, take these opportunities and apply for these bids and support. So there's lots of things coming up. And then, as James said, the key thing really is adopting the Reading transport strategy. So yeah, hopefully sometime soon. So that's it really. And we've just put up a couple of links to our active travel page and our school streets page, which we keep up to date as much as possible. So please do feel free to have a look. And if anyone has any questions after this, then feel free to make contact with us at the email address. So yeah, thanks for listening.
Thank you, James, and thank you, Lucy. Possibly, Lucy, if you could put those email links in the chat so people can access them from that from there. Well, it's all very well putting in all these facilities if nobody actually uses them. So you've actually got to get people's behaviour to change. So this is where Richard Kirk, the CEO of Better Points, has some ideas of how we actually might get, not preaching to the converted, but those who have not yet seen the light. So I'll hand over to Richard.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, as I just introduced, I'm Richard Kirk. I'm the Chief Exec of Better Points. We are international leaders in positive incentivized behavior change in active travel, which we're talking about today, and also in health. And of course, all of those come together in climate change. We work across the UK and internationally. The importance of today is we're only 8 years away from non-fossil fuel cars. We're only 8 years away from the net zero commitments that have been made in Reading and other places around the UK. That's even less time that's passed since the London Olympics, which seems like yesterday. But time is like burning away, and I think as we go through this very short presentation, we'll see just how much so. We've had good things happening as far as integrating climate change. ESG, sponsored and promoted by the United Nations Sustainability Goals, and the relatively new Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, which was introduced in November 2020 by Her Majesty's Government, and will be mandatory for the large businesses by 2023. So this is like urgent, and for other businesses by 2025. But we've got integration coming for climate change, which is great within the next 4 years. Where does active travel fit within this? Well, 19% of emissions are from road traffic. But an active travel is an easy win, but it's only part of it. And the net zero challenge is much, much broader. So the importance of where active travel sits has to be recognised. Active travel, as we know, is walking, running, cycling, wheeling, scooting. And as it says here, in fact, anything that uses physical activity transport rather than solely for leisure and fitness. This is not to promote Better Points as a company. I think that today is far more important to address climate change. But this is the only slide I'm going to really mention Better Points on. So we motivate, we incentivize behavior change in active travel. We try to encourage people to take up active travel. There are a lot of programs in behavior change that go out to cyclists, and we want to people to continue cycling, but we're not aiming at the cycling clubs that do all the hundreds of miles a week. We're aiming at people that don't do anything at the moment at all. We want to encourage people to do something and to get up to the healthy standards that the NHS insists on. But we also do other things. We move people across from cars to public transport. We encourage people to share cars. We encourage people on Innowe and single-use plastics. And we put all this within an app. And this app tracks people, or they put things in by QR code. It tracks people. It enables them to see how they're progressing. It sends messages at the beginning to ask how they're traveling. So you get all this data coming out at the other end. And it sends messages whilst they're doing the activity to encourage them to go on that extra stage. And then it rewards. And it rewards, as Emma was saying about the high street, it rewards at the moment particularly to regenerate the high street by sending people down the high street with points that they can redeem for a coffee, or they can use in a cycle shop, or they can give to a local charity, as well as the usual national awards. But we do all those programs, but the relevance of today is seeing where active travel fits within climate change, and how we can influence climate change through business. At the moment, there's a little bit of a silo approach, and that silo approach is where you've got councils and governments on one side, and you've got businesses on the other. And as we've just heard from James and Lucy, tremendous work going on in active travel in Reading. And what we need here is for this active travel to be linked up with not just the DFT, but also what the DHSC, what DEFRA is doing on air quality, all coming together as one. And so we're giving the citizen or the individual one set of goals to aim for, rather than having it fragmented. So here we can see that we're going right across this piece by breaking the silos down and creating a single platform with one single message, so that people can understand what it is to get the high street revitalized, to go for net zero, to have both the employee engagement, all the things that you see up there, improving health, and getting business benefits coming across. And it's to businesses I want to turn, because business leaders can join the dots between all the policies that are put in at central government and down to councils. If you take Reading, I believe, has got a population of 324,000, and 76% of people between the age of 16 and 64 are working. And that means we've got 250,000 people that can be addressed by business leaders. That's very difficult to do it if you're in government or a council, because where do people go to? People don't look at a screen every night and say, oh, I wonder what the government or the council is asking them to do. But they do listen to what business leaders are asking them to do. So this is where we've got big wins for business. By speaking with people and addressing ESG, by addressing the climate issues that we've got now, we can increase employee engagement, improve employee health and well-being. The ESG alignment is automatic that way with the UN sustainability goals. Greater public profile and the public leadership that comes from the CEOs who are leading this. And this is where it is not just lip service, which I'll return to, but it is leadership. And we find then that we get an ecosystem evolving and expanding, just as you see there, going right the way through society. Now, I just caution against language here, because we talk about ecosystem, we talk about behavior change techniques and all sorts of I was going to say psychobabble. It's not. They are words that are scientifically behind all the behavior change things that we do. But it's important that where we're addressing the citizen and employees, we talk with them, not at them by using terms that are only those familiar to those that are in the trade. So it's important. But this is the ecosystem that evolves. And to talk with people, we have three main channels, in our opinion. One is digital, and this is the social media, the local media, the newsletters that comes through our phones, through our computers. The second one is physical. And we've all seen the signs in libraries, the signs in shops, etc. But we've got bus shelters, we've got posters, we've got petrol pump, which is a very good place to get active travel going, petrol pump caps. There are lots of opportunities to physically put print across. But I think the big one is the emotional one, where we can get businesses combining with community leaders, combining with religious leaders, celebrities, teachers, doctors, but all getting the same one single message across about the climate. There's lots of talk about infrastructure, be it in roads, be it in transport, be it in housing, all the things that are going to happen as far as climate change is concerned. But all of these things, all of them need people. And we have to change people's behaviour. Governments and councils cannot connect to people alone. business leaders have the biggest reach, and we can see that by the number of people working. It's so much easier to communicate with them. And as I started, we're in a hurry. We need action, not words. We need leaders, not lip service. I'm Richard Kirk. Thank you very much indeed. I'm now going to try and turn this off and go back onto the screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. That was terrific. I feel we sort of whizzed through three very important perspectives, and I think maybe just need a moment to reflect on what everybody said. Just keeping an eye on the chat, and I think Catherine has as well. And I think John Sharp has made a couple of points. It might be easier actually if John could actually just put them himself rather than me reading out the points he's made, which is largely about the cycle routes. I think this may be aimed at James and Lucy. So is John there?
If not, I've got the question here.
Okay, right, Catherine, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, I'm on. Yeah,
Do you remember what you asked?
Yeah. So the first one was about the cycle hub. You know, you're saying it's going to be north of the station, which is fine. The issue with north of the station, there isn't any segregated route to it. So I think that's kind of fundamental. You want a segregated route. If you're coming from south of Reading, you'd have to be on a bus lane, which is really not suitable for children. I don't feel comfortable sharing a bus lane with children when I'm cycling, taking kids on a bus lane. So that's really quite a problem. So first of all, that's where you've chosen to put it. How are you going to make it accessible?
Just to clarify, we haven't chosen to put it in the north. I was just talking about what we've already got in the north, the two-tiered cycle hub. So I think maybe I wasn't very clear on that bit, but yeah, the cycle hub that we were talking about with regards to the capability fund, that would be based more within the town centre area. Yeah, I think there may have just been a bit of a misinterpretation, or perhaps I wasn't clear enough. But yeah, the north is not what we was talking about for this particular one. But I understand your points that you make with regards to bus lanes not being necessarily appropriate for younger children, perhaps, or less confident cyclists, and that segregation it gives you much better sense of safety and protection. So yeah, I definitely agree with your points on that.
Okay, on to the, I mean, you've dealt with the third one, because it's basically what I see in a lot of this is you know, do say you're going to do something, but what it turns out to be is pictures of bikes on the road and white lines on the road, which doesn't stop cars veering into them as you're cycling down them. For example, if they want to undertake a car turning right, sort of thing that happens to me on a regular basis. I'm cycling down a cycle route, and then the car decides that I want to get past the car in front of them that's turning right, so they go into the cycle lane. They don't bother to look to see if there's a cyclist there. So with these new plans, are you actually planning to put in segregated lanes, or are we just getting more paint on the road?
Yes, yeah, good question. So basically, with the Shinfield Road scheme, and if we're successful, the Bath Road scheme, they will be both, with Tranche 2, it's permanent schemes, whereas Tranche 1 was temporary, so it was like get them in now, and that's why painted white lines were put in. So with the Tranche 2 ones, I can assure you that it will be physically segregated. So we're looking at perhaps using stepped curbs. So basically, it's not a full height curb; it's a half height curb. So it allows crossover for people trying to access their properties, because Shinfield Road, there's quite a few properties along it, but it's still maintains a level of protection, and there is the delineation between pedestrians, cyclists, and then vehicles. So it's, we're looking at basically following the new local transport note 120, which really does push the whole segregation and is steering away from painted white lines. So that's something that DFT are really pushing at the moment.
And the other point is this, the cycle lanes that have gone in up to now, or they haven't been white lines, they've been shared pedestrian. So it's existing pavements, cyclists are then allowed to use them, which is, I think, it causes friction between cyclists and pedestrians. And then, of course, cyclists get the idea that they can cycle anywhere, which is not great for, it just isn't great. I've got a big hedge. I have cyclists flying back and down just outside my house. My parents are dead now, but they were very ancient. If they'd walked out and had a cyclist hit them, they probably would have killed them. They wouldn't have survived it.
There's, again, I think this is aimed at James and Lucy as a question about cooperation. It's Adrian Betteridge about the cooperation between local councils, because obviously you talk about Shinfield Road and you go down Shinfield Road and suddenly you become Wokingham. Well, you don't, but you know what I mean. So I just wondered, when you install, maybe Adrian could answer the question, ask the question himself rather than me speaking for him.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, Adrian. Yeah,
thank you. I'm not from the council. I'm a resident in Wokingham, but do a lot of activism around this area. And I've seen the plans from Reading. I've seen the plans from Wokingham. They don't currently match up. And the question is, how do we take a bigger picture view at where people travel from one to the other? I know the early iteration of the Reading RLC Whip did look at large parts of Wokingham, but we seem to have slightly gone off track since then. So I'm wondering what the view from the very capable people I heard from Reading is on how we work better together across the boundaries.
Yeah, John, should I take this one or do you?
Well, I was just going to say, before you can probably cover the RLC Whip cooperation, Lucy, but I think one of the barriers between the working between authorities is obviously as we have different politics or different members, and we have to report up to senior members, and that's sort of obviously at officer level we can talk to officers at Wokingham, but then at that sort of more senior level decisions can be made or changed. But certainly at officer level we do speak with colleagues at Wokingham and West Berkshire, Hampshire and Oxfordshire on a very regular basis. We also work together at the Berkshire local, at the Berkshire Strategic Transport Forum. So there's a very good relationship at officer level, but I think it is just difficult in the nature of actually it's a different set of senior officers, members and politics, the different local authority. And so there's always going to be a trade-off in the priorities of different authorities, and that's just unfortunately something that Berkshire, it has to grapple with, where other counties would be unitaries. So that is something that does cause challenges, but it is something that we do work very hard with colleagues. We have very good relationships, and we speak very regularly on all matters from active travel to bus planning. Obviously the bus services cover all the area, and the highway and the network as well. So in terms of the RLC Whip, Lucy, you're probably better placed to talk about our cooperation with Wokingham on that.
Yeah, so as you already mentioned, our RLC Whip covers the Reading wider urban area, so elements of West Berkshire as well as Wokingham Borough. When we developed that, we were working with both officers in West Berks and Wokingham, and kind of agreed the routes, this is a strategic route, this is an orbital, local, leisure, whatever. And recently we've actually been in conversation with Wokingham, who are currently developing their own RLC Whip. And that again links into the area that we have in our joint RLC Whip, if that makes sense. So we are currently discussing how we can kind of link better, because they might now that time has passed a bit and the LTN 120's come out, they might have a slightly different viewpoint on things. So yeah, as James says, we are always in conversation with them, and even the Shinfield Road scheme, we consult and engage with them as well as the public. They are a key stakeholder. And another point just to make on the Shinfield Road scheme is that it links to Shinfield Rye. So that's the end of, well, one end of the route. And then that links in with their local network in the Wokingham borough. So we have tried to make as best of the links that we've got. But yeah, ideally, if Wokingham could continue the route further down Shinfield Road, that would be brilliant. But yeah, I hope I've answered that. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's certainly on the draft of the RLC Whip at the moment, that there isn't a link in.
Yeah.
We made that point, and I think that's been taken on board. But we're also spending our tranche 2 money on a route from Woodley to Palmer Park, which I don't think links up with anything you're doing at the moment. So it feels like it's gone astray slightly, and we need to try and get it joined up again. But thanks for the answer.
I'm trying to speak and I'm muted. Emma, I see you've got your hand up. Would you like to ask a question?
Thanks, Catherine. No, I just wanted to add to that, actually, because Adrian, you mentioned you've got a sort of campaigning perspective on this rather than a local authorities perspective. I'm also involved in campaigning in my local authority area, so I'm part of Cycle Winchester. And I think there's also a message here. It was really great to hear in the presentation about how consultative a lot of these processes should be. So these, you know, we've talked a lot about behaviour change and the kind of scale of the challenge. If people feel invested in these things, then some of those political divisions, which have also been alluded to in the chat, I think can be less acute. So from a cycle campaigning perspective, we've been looking at LC whips across Hampshire. So we've actually been, in the same way that local authorities are trying to work across boundaries, we've been trying to join up from a sort of campaigning or citizen sort of perspective as well. And I think provided that the authorities that are developing these plans are open to inputs from a wide range of users, but also non-users, because let's face it, as particularly as Richard mentioned, those are the people that we really need to try and get on board in active travel. Then I think there are really great possibilities from that. So I think it's also about joining up outside of local authorities as well, and trying to, you know, in some instances call out exactly as you did. Well, that doesn't make sense with that. Why is that happening? There might be a reason for that, but it sometimes may be an oversight. So I think there's opportunities from both sides to think collectively about these things.
Can I ask a bit of a junior question? I think you were talking about LC Whip. I don't know what that is. Can somebody enlighten me?
Local cycling walking implementation plan.
Ooh, okay, well, okay.
It has lots of very pretty maps in it with lots of coloured lines on it where the bike routes are. One point I was going to make is a referral to the bike hub, which north of the station, just over a year ago, Ethical Reading got together with the various people to try and encourage active travel. One of the deterrents to cycling was the fear that their bicycle would be stolen. And so we looked at bike hubs, and they have some up in the northeast. And we did a presentation as part of last year's Climate Festival, and also met with, I think it was with James and Councillor Page. And then it all went very quiet. We thought, oh, well, that was very nice. And it all went, nothing happened. You know, they've filed it somewhere. But lo and behold, as Lucy pointed out, Reading Council have been awarded more or less £250,000, of which a large chunk of that will go towards some sort of bike hub. The idea being that when people go into the town centre, either to shop or maybe to work, that there is somewhere secure where they can leave their bicycle. And in a perfect, if funds and all the rest of it stretch far enough, also somewhere where you can have your bike, you know, sort of serviced, or where you can have things, you know, puncture repaired and all so on. And the bike kitchen is also considering maybe a little bit of retail. So, as I say, I know local authorities often given a good kicking by everybody. But in this case, as I say, we had a meeting and it thought of, well, nothing's happened. And then, the action is really, something will happen. It may not be the perfect bike hub in the world, but it would be a terrific bike. It will add to certainly, as Emma said, to the town centre, which, Brenton Town Centre is not too bad. It's not as gloomy as some, but it was a positive impact. Right. Firstly, I'd like to thank everybody for attending. I also like to particularly thank Emma, James, Lucy and Richard for their terrific presentations and given us, well, certainly me, a lot to think about. I think that's always, thinking can be a bit of a dangerous thing, but certainly stimulating and interesting. We will, as it's being recorded, and so we will tidy it up, this presentation, and it will go on to the Ethical Reading YouTube channel, so those people who are unable to attend this afternoon can catch up there. And also we hope to disseminate the information that was on here, because as I say, I think it was really worthwhile. But if you want to keep up to date with what Ethical Reading are doing, you can see here the Ethical Reading website. There's a sustainability program along with other things as well. And in particular, there's the Trees for Reading program that we're getting individuals and businesses to contribute to the greening of particularly the centre of Reading, where there isn't much tree cover. So I think unless anyone else has any other points they wish to make, Catherine or anyone else, I shall. There we are. That is the Reading Climate Action Network site. If you wish to, they have lots more talks and presentations going on this week as part of their Climate Festival. And just to thank everybody for attending and contributing.